Good morning and welcome to everyone joining us in today's forum entitled 2023 U.S. Project Myoushu-PBBM Rapes RP 2024, Moving On with BRI, Philippines Inflation, Crime, Terrorism. The subjects that we will cover for today, um, we are covering four subjects for today. Number one, 2023 U.S. Project Myoushu, PBBM Rapes RP. Number two, 2024, Moving On with BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. Number three, the Philippines deteriorating rapidly. Inflation, crime, internal threats with terrorism, security shifted from internal to external. And finally, PBBM supports for Israel isolates the Philippines from OFWs in the Arab world. Our first speaker will be Professor Ana Malindog Uy, the Vice President for External Affairs for Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies. But before that, I'd like to hand it over to Mr. Herman Laurel, President of Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies Institute, to give some short intro.
Okay, this is going to be the year-ender of our Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies think tank group and an evaluation of the entire 2023 and a projection of what we expect to happen in 2024. While we're waiting for Ana, who will be very busy the whole day today with another session this afternoon in Beijing. So she requested to be the first speaker for this morning. Okay, we're still waiting for Ana, no? Wala pa dyan, no? So actually, our theme is now revised to 2023 betrayal. It's a year of betrayal of BBM, of the many ideals of his father, Ferdinand Adralin Marcos Sr., the independent foreign policy where Ferdinand Marcos Sr. established relations with China, Soviet Russia at that time, and the socialist countries. Bongbong Marcos has reversed this and has gone back to the vassalage status with the United States of America. Of course, President Rodrigo R. Duterte tried to pursue and support the policies of Ferdinand Adralin Marcos Sr., but again, this has been betrayed by Bongbong Marcos. So this is the theme for 2023, and which I will be elaborating later on after Madam Ana Malindog Uy. Our vision for 2024 is that this will now change. The effort to taunt China to yield in any way the firm exercise of sovereignty over its claim over the South China Sea areas has collapsed. It cannot be revived again. We can already see the flagging spirits of the American boys who are operating in behalf of the Project Myoushu of the U.S. Naval Institute under Powell, Raymond Powell, ex-colonel, U.S. Air Force, Raymond Powell. So that will be in sum what I will be discussing and will be the year-ender of our strategic studies and our evaluation. Is Ana already ready? In the meantime, we also shall have a discussion of the latest article from our youngest colleague, Daniel Long, which has been published in our Asian Century Journal and republished by Cat's Chronicle and some other websites. It has been an eye-opener for many people. The title is
The title is Philippines Provoked China's Water Cannoning at a Yungin Show. So it's very provocative, but
yes.
the details are all there.
Yeah, so Daniel's article is getting a lot of thumbs up from the readers from various
Sectors.
centers and websites. So we will also have a report from Ado Paglinawan on the domestic political crisis that the government of PBBM faces. And we welcome questions and comments from our Zoom audience and of course
Please
from
send your questions to the Zoom chat or
Right.
comment them on Facebook or in YouTube if you have any. Thank you. We'll read them later.
Wala pa ba si Ana? 5 minutes.
Okay.
So we have 5 minutes. Sige, take it away.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for appreciating my new article. I'd just like to give a short review and recap of my article here. Over the past last weekend, we experienced two water cannoning incidents by China against the Philippines in Ayungin and Scarborough Shoal. I'd like to focus on the Ayungin Shoal. What is interesting to me is that the mainstream media and the government, particularly the Coast Guard, the armed forces, and the president, are omitting a lot of facts in the dispute. For example, they omit the fact that there is an agreement between the Philippines and China, mutual agreement not to send construction materials. They're not making the very important distinction of resupply of humanitarian goods, food, water, medicine versus resupply of quote-unquote resupply of construction materials. This may include steel, welding materials, etc. The other thing I'd like to that the media is not revealing to us is that when the president says and the rest of the government are saying that the resupply missions are done in accordance with international law, particularly UNCLOS or the United Nations Convention of the Laws of the Seas, is that they are not telling us that the 2016 tribunal, which they consider the arbitral award, which they consider part of international law, does not grant them the jurisdiction or authority to conduct these resupply missions, precisely because the resupply missions are military in nature, as admitted now by former Justice Carpio, who is not, no one will ever accuse him of being a Chinese mouthpiece or spokesperson or traitor or anything like that. So Justice Carpio made those comments in various interviews this week, where he did not, he seemed to not to defend even the resupply missions. Anyway, so Professor Ana Malindogoy, Vice President of Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies External Affairs, is here. Let us welcome her for opening remarks.
Hello? Naririnig ako, no? Okay naman?
Yes, you can be heard.
Okay, so let me be quick because I have another appointment in an hour. So my assignment for this media forum is actually to talk more about how important it is for the Philippines and China to have that strong economic ties and cooperation, in view of the fact that there are some experts or and academics that are urging the Philippine government to consider and stop, existing business operations in the Chinese business operation in the country, in view of the ongoing escalating and mounting tension in the South China Sea between China and, of course, the Philippines, no, for that matter. So let me elaborate a little bit on that, and later my other colleagues will explain more the other issues that will be tackled in this media forum. One thing that we have to remember, I think, is when you talk about trade relationship between China and the Philippines, it is important and crucial because given that China is one of the largest trading partner or the largest trading partner and a significant source of imports and export of the Philippines. Note that China has been the Philippines' top trading partner for 7 consecutive years, with bilateral trade reaching $87.73 billion in 2022. In the first 7 months of this year, 2023, China jumped to become the largest export market for the Philippines. Thus, China remains the country's vital economic and trade partner and is still one of the country's top sources of investment. In terms of government to government or G to G cooperation project between the Philippines and China, they have yielded fruitful outcomes with nearly 40 projects carried out in recent years, 18 of which had been completed. Apart from the cash and rice fertilizers and COVID-19 vaccines donation, an important highlight in infrastructure cooperation such as the construction of the China Aid Australia-Pantaleon Bridge, the Binondo Intramuros Bridge, the Bukana Bridge, and other infrastructure projects. You can see also there's such a thing as the Philippine Sino Center for Agricultural Technology Cooperation Program, which is a good example of the bilateral agricultural cooperation between the two countries. So if you look at this, it's very obvious that China is an economic partner and a trade partner, an important one for the Philippines. Hence, any decision to cut and stop Chinese business operation and ties in the country could disrupt this economic cooperation and trade dynamics and potentially affect the Philippine economy adversely. Therefore, cutting business, trade, and economic ties with China, as being suggested by some so-called experts and some academics, would not be beneficial for the Philippines for several reasons. First, China's investment provide necessary financial support for large-scale domestic infrastructure projects, as I have mentioned earlier. Second, China is the Philippines' again largest trading partner, the largest source of imports, and a major export market for the Philippines. The bilateral trade between the two countries with substantial import and export contributes significantly to the Philippine economy. Cutting trade and economic ties could lead to potential economic instability on the side of the Philippines. Not so much on China, but it will affect us more, I think, because China is a way bigger economy. It's actually the second largest economy in the world, and probably in a matter of time, it will be the first. So it will affect more the Philippines rather than China. In terms of China's foreign investment, it plays a critical role in various sectors of the Philippine economy, including infrastructure, trade, and investment. A sudden severance of economic ties could lead to a sharp decline in foreign direct investment, affecting the sectors that I've mentioned and possibly leading to job losses and economic downturns. And fourth, abruptly ending economic ties with China could strain diplomatic relations. It can affect the bilateral dynamics and relationship between the two countries. Geopolitically speaking, in South China Sea, in terms of dynamics, economic ties with China is like a balancing your relationship with major players in Southeast Asia as well. It is of strategic interest to the Philippines. Diplomatic and economic engagement are part of this balance, and disrupting them would have wider geopolitical repercussions. Within the Philippines, there's a potential also for domestic repercussion, including displacement of workers, especially in sectors heavily reliant on Chinese investment. So the complexity of international trade and diplomacy suggests that any move or entertaining this kind of suggestion of stop and cutting existing Chinese business operation in the country would have to be carefully considered, or actually should never be considered for that matter, because it would really affect adversely the Philippine economy and its global standing. On the side of the Philippines, any decision on this matter should really be, a balance of consideration of both of national interest, economic gain, and sovereignty, integrity. This should be the consideration, and this should be the center of the debate when you talk about these things, because this is not a simple matter, and this is not just an easy matter. This is very important. This is all about the lifeblood of the country, and which is the economy of the country. On the contrary, for countries like the Philippines, developing countries like the Philippines, continuing to do business and forging strong economic cooperation and ties with China, which is right now is the world's economic powerhouse, is crucial for several reasons. I would give some reasons why it is important. First is access to capital. Through initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, China provides a source of investment, capital for both soft and hard infrastructure. When you say soft infrastructure, this is more in the digital infrastructure and technology. And of course, when you talk about hard infrastructure, this is like, the ports, the bridges, the roads, and all that. And one more thing, I mean, China is leading as well when you talk about green energy. So, because of climate change. So if we can since we can have access to this green technology, which are very much needed if you want to address issues related to the environment, especially to climate change. So that's very important. Another thing is the trade opportunities. We don't forget that China is a vast market with an increasing middle class. When you talk about middle class, this means that, the purchasing power of the Chinese people is way higher, actually compared to any countries in the world as of this time. So we have to have that access to that market because it will help the Philippines in terms of increasing revenues. And when you export, if the goods are consumed in that country, and then you get revenues, and it's very important if you want to have economic growth, because the revenue you can use it for buying technologies or other kind of imports from the international market that is needed for our economy. China's also demand for commodities like electronics and other goods can drive growth in these sectors in the Philippines. Another thing that's very, very important for our country is job creation. China's investment typically come with job opportunities for local population. These jobs are not only in the construction phase of the project, but also in the operational phase, which can help reduce unemployment and improve living standards of Filipinos. Economic stability and growth. Strong trade and economic relation with China can contribute to economic stability and growth of the country. As the Philippine economy grows, increased trade with China can support various sectors such as manufacturing, services, thereby diversifying economic activities, reducing vulnerability to external shocks. This is another thing which is very, very important at this time is technological transfer. Engaging with a highly technologically advanced country like China can lead to technology transfer, which is critical for the modernization of industry in the Philippines. We need technology in the country. Even in agriculture, our agricultural sector is not modernized. How would you access this technology if you don't have good relation with a country that is highly technologically advanced? In many ways, it's really advanced in artificial intelligence and other kind of technology. It's leading the fourth industrial revolution at this time. So I think this is very important for us to think about and, to consider. All of this can help improve the productivity and competitiveness of the Philippines on a global scale. Infrastructure development. Again, this is important. The Philippines, when you talk about economic development, one of the missing links, or the missing link actually, is infrastructure development. Like this is not just this is not just happening in the Philippines, but it's very common in developing countries. Lack of infrastructure needed to support sustained economic growth is a problem. So China's investment in infrastructure can help bridge this gap, improving not only transportation and logistics, but also access to digital and green energy technology and infrastructure. And one more thing, geopolitical consideration. For geopolitical stability and to have a balanced foreign policy, it is important for countries like the Philippines to maintain amicable relation with major world powers, including China. This can also give us as a country more leverage in negotiation and international forums. So to conclude, the economic relationship with China can offer a mix of economic opportunities and benefits for our country. The benefits of engaging with the world's second largest economy, which who knows in a matter of time could be the first largest economy in the world, can be substantial for the Philippines' economic development, growth, and long-term strategic interest. So I hope that, I hope the so-called experts or academics, before they suggest or say things like, stop our deals or this Chinese business operation in the Philippines, should weigh things first before making any kind of suggestion, which is, for me, to be very frank, it's like an economic suicide. If these people really truly care for the welfare of the country and the well-being of Filipinos. So that's my take, and that is my assignment for this media forum. And I would like to thank everyone and my colleagues in the Asian Century PH for having me. I am so sorry if I would not be able to finish the whole media forum. I have to speak in another event, and thank you so much. And I really hope that when it comes to our country, we should always try to balance things. And the economy is important. It's the lifeblood of our country. Without a strong economy, I mean, nothing will happen to the Philippines. It is very important, and I hope we should look at things not always in a political way, or we should not only use political lens. We should always use also the economic lens as the business lens, so that we can weigh perspective and we can make a good and informed decision for our country. And I hope the government also will have the same way of looking at things. And thank you so much. And back to you, Daniel. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Ana Malindog Uy. Thank you for reminding us that the national interest is not served by engaging in economic suicide. And we wish you well in the rest of your events this day.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay. All right, next we have Mr. Herman Laurel, otherwise known as Kamentong. He's the president of Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies, and he will deliver a presentation on the recent developments in the country, particularly Project Myoushu.
Okay. So nagpapalitan kami ng magmask kasi nga galing sa pneumonia si Daniel, and I'm 72 years old, so medyo nag-iingat tayo. Now na nakaraan na po ang isang taon, it has been almost 12 months of high expectations and a sudden betrayal by the chief executive of the Republic of the Philippines, from a very rosy picture that we started in January 2023, where the flourishing relations between the Philippines and the People's Republic of China brought over the past 6 years so many fruits of this friendship, bridges in Davao, in Metro Manila, irrigation systems in the Cordilleras, as mentioned by Madam Ana Malindog Uy, the Phil-Sino Agricultural Technology Center, anti-drug centers, and so on. We suddenly faced, since February of 2023, a 180-degree pivot back to the hegemonic interest in the world, that is the United States of America. Well, I started earlier by summarizing historically what has happened, what we have seen from Bongbong Marcos since February of 2023 is a betrayal of the ideals in our Constitution of an independent foreign policy, of the absence of foreign military bases in the country, of economic development and industrialization of the country, which was espoused by and implemented by President Ferdinand E. Marcos Sr. Since the 1970s through the 80s, and pursued by President Rodrigo R. Duterte, who reinvigorated the nationalist program of President Edralin Marcos, reversing 30 years of the U.S.-imposed neoliberal oligarchy-centered EDSA Uno society under President Corazon C. Aquino after the EDSA Uno regime change operations of the Americans. In turn, Duterte's reinvigoration was reversed by BBM, who supported the decision of the Supreme Court for the extension of the EDCA bases and rejected strategic cooperation with China in favor of a new vassalage under the United States, thus submitting to the diktats of U.S. hegemonic designs. 11 months after BBM sprung his betrayals on the nation, evidence has surfaced of the U.S. BBM conspiracy to cheat in the 2022 elections. Underhandedly prepare for the subversion of Philippine sovereignty, which we are beginning to see, and attempt to restore U.S. hegemony in Asia through the stabilization, division, and promotion of conflict or tension that may lead to war similar to Ukraine, and abort the rise of the Asian century through an economic Armageddon similar to that faced by Europe in the aftermath of the Ukraine war. The expose of the BBM Smartmatic collusion is now on record. Same with the public admission of the US military sources of its plot to provoke Philippine-China tensions through the US naval intelligence operations, quote, Myoushu project, unquote. And quote again, forward operating base Sierra Madre. It's time to build the forward operating base Sierra Madre, unquote. These moves, in collaboration with the Albert del Rosario Institute and Stratbase, the BBM's top security and Coast Guard and defense agencies have been laid bare for all to see. The evidence is already there. Words from the American security and defense agencies and institutions themselves speak of this plot to divide, conquer Asia for the Americans again. And you can again see the evidence. I think we're showing it now on the screen. This first one is the second one actually. This is the first one. Project Myoushu presented its conceptual conference in January 2023, hosted by Stratbase. They presented it to the Albert del Rosario Institute, that is also the base of Stratbase, and from where Justice Carpio operates, Richard Aydarian, J. Batumbakal, and so on. The evidence is there. This is a basis for charging them with treason at some point in time. We are studying this matter because we have, again, I repeat, evidence admitted by the Americans themselves. They have charged people from our perspective as traitors. No, they have no evidence, but we have evidence of their treason against the Republic of the Philippines, including BBM. So the next one is the, again, well, of course, this is the leadership chart of Operation Myoushu, headed by Raymond Powell, which is described there as Project Myoushu team lead or team leader. Robert Powell, Raymond Powell. So very clear. We also have the mastermind, the enforcer, and as you will note, if you follow the history from February to today, Raymond Powell is lockstep with Tariela, which I will still continue. Myoushu project team leader, U.S. Air Force ex-Colonel Raymond Powell has been in lockstep with Commodore J. Tariela of the Philippine Coast Guard in practically all their misadventures, from the Philippine Coast Guard's many provocative actions to the attempted deliveries of construction materials to the BRP Sierra Madre in violation of Philippine-China agreement, which is evidenced by statements from our former Defense Secretary, Voltaire Gasmin. So again, we have evidence here. We have no doubt that this agreement exists, and it is highly doubtful that it has been rescinded by BBM. Okay, and now in violation of Philippine-China agreement to now phase 2 of Project Myoushu, the atin ito, politicized and yellow-tainted civil society and EDSA Uno elements activity or operation. While the US BBM tries shifts the country towards the fallacious external defense. Remember, they announced that they are now focusing on external defense against the imagined China threat. Imagine lang po talaga yan. Posture. The US pressures the country's politically and economically blackmailed elite. This elite po is the political economic elite represented by personalities and characters like Gibo Teodoro, Zubiri, barbers, and so on. They are economically tied to the Americans with their properties in the States, with their traditional businesses, and so on. Blackmailed elite to loosen the, this is again part of the conspiracy of Operation Myoushu and the Americans, the democratic space for domestic insurgents to recuperate and reactivate. Again, the peace talks with the CPP, NPA, NDF. People are asking why this has to be revived when the CPP, NPA, NDF has been effectively quelched already by the NTF LCAC operations during the time of President Duterte. Why? Because the Americans are now in power and they want to revive all the insurgent forces to destabilize Philippine society internally, so it is will be weaker to the diktats of the Americans. So shifting to the external defense, which also has revived the Muslim separatist insurgency, as we will go on to see. The signs are aplenty, from the ballyhooed return to the International Criminal Court by way of discredited human rights talking points. Again, tapos na yung ICC, binuhay na naman ngayon. These are the crucial issues and questions and evidence of this American plot with BBM to destroy again the solidarity of the Republic of the Philippines. To the comedic peace talks with the red groups and the revival of separatist terror gangs, the U.S. destabilizes its allies to use in its global agenda for chaos and hegemony. ASEAN and its members, save for one, which is the Philippines, except for one, not the Philippines, are wise to the insidious ways of U.S. hegemonism. Hence, Singapore's Prime Minister Lee Hsien Loong warned the Philippines by asking if, quote, the Philippines want to be the battleground, unquote. The admonition came right before, Vietnam upgraded its relations with China, which came at the heels of that proud nation's rejection of an anti-China alliance offered by the United States of America. Comparatively, the Philippines is now the pariah of ASEAN, a leper with U.S. bioengineered necrosis rotting its flesh. On top of that, the Philippines is on the brink of an economic precipice, driven by the frenzied corruption of, quotes, rats preparing for a ship to sink, unquote. With its progressive alienation from the world's economic engine, China. Even as China continues to promote Belt and Road Initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative by way of 3 major rail projects in Mindanao, North and South Luzon, the BBM government continues to unilaterally announce their termination. Still, China has also just donated a 3.5 billion peso Bocana Bridge in Davao as it continues to contemplate the Cagayan Gateway projects proposed by Cagayan Province Governor Manuel Mamba. Moreover, in as much as the Chico River Dam irrigation project is now enriching the harvests of 10,000 farming families in the north, a delegation from the province of Kalinga called on the ACP, the Asian Century Philippines Strategic Studies Institute, to seek assistance on the commencement of the project, the Chico River Dam project's second phase or phase 2, as the province, Kalinga, being the upper source of the irrigation system, still has to benefit from hydroelectricity and irrigation to come from the yet-to-be-implemented phase 2. Verily, such delays, similar to the suspended giant railway projects in quotation marks, because they're not really suspended yet from the point of view of the People's Republic of China. These suspensions are crippling the nation's economy. It is against this sad backdrop that Filipino politicians are falling all over each other, all over themselves, to grandstand with the anti-China rhetoric that are unconscionably aired without fail by the mainstream media networks, all to ingratiate themselves to the United States. Not surprisingly, the mainstream media networks, we are sick of them, of the Salim groups and its other pro-US allies are only too willing to cooperate. As these talking heads echo their master's belief that the West Philippine Sea, in quotation marks, amin to. Ano? You will see it. Evidence, March 10, 2014, sinabi ni Manny Pangilinan, inalok ang Spratlys to the Chinese oil firm Reed Bank in the Reed Bank talks. We have evidence in everything that we're saying. Yan ang talagang nasa likod po nila Carpio, this Salim group, which is tied up of course with the American financial mafia. Atin ito or akin ito. Yan ang actual na sinasabi ni Manuel Pangilinan. Binubuhay na naman ni Manny Pangilinan ito lately. So please keep this in mind. All this trouble, all the delay in our joint gas and oil exploration and exploitation deal with China na winasak po ni Teddy Boy Locsin in behalf of Manny Pangilinan and the Salim Group yan. Yang walang hiya, I will tell them straight, Locsin, walang hiyang tao po yan na inaantala po, sinabotahe at inaantala po ang pagpasok po ng bilyong-bilyong dolyar sana na kapakinabangan ng ating bayan na sa ngayon. Pero dahil dito sa mga American boys, mga utusan ng mga Amerikano through the Salim Group, sinira po yan. Okay, and so again, the evidence is there. Mindless political ducks are quacking nonsense, as Madam Ana Malindogoy has explained earlier, calling for the boycott of Chinese products. Let me just check if I'm following the images. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and medyo nag-skip din ako ng ilang mga images. Mas kompleto yung kay Joshua. And declared the Chinese ambassador persona non grata, unquote, simply shoot their mouths off to the media without considering the consequences. Hence, our tourism industry has lost the potential earnings from 2 million Chinese tourists, even as the country's largest malls say, quote, China feud may hurt businesses, unquote, which means hurting millions of Filipino consumers. At the same time, Mindanao exporters dread a repeat of the 2012 rotting fruits in the island of Mindanao. As Project Myoushu fails to intimidate the Chinese Coast Guard and Chinese volunteer fishing vessels from exercising their sovereign control of the Ayungin and Scarborough shoals, the hacks shift to phase 2 with their akin ito Christmas convoy of 40 ships and fishing boats, only to have it quickly aborted when mere water cannons are able to inflict damage to their 2 Philippine Coast Guard boats, hired or integral. Not to worry though, they never say never spirit will again rear its ugly head come Valentine's Day 2024 as the National Security Council considers another new approach. Meanwhile, even as the U.S. through its ambassador Mary Kay Carlson, along with half a dozen of its allies protested China's sovereign control exertions, the global and Filipino social media community were one in saying, talk is cheap, where are your ships beside the Philippine boats? These are just samples from Twitter of reaction. People telling the American ambassador, send in the US Navy, no more talking. In 1946, the Americans reminded the Philippines that its independence, anyway, uh, was not Philippine territory. Spratly was not Philippine territory, both to not anger Chiang Kai-shek in China and because the Spratlys were not part of the Philippines per the 1898 treaties of Spain with Spain signed with America. And so forth. Thousands of such comments from the public telling the Americans, you shut up if you do not put up. You know? Okay. Okay, and meanwhile, okay, if they even have half a brain, did the U.S. minions in the Philippines believe that the U.S. meant anything else than fighting to the last Filipino? As columnist Bobby Tiglao said recently, military Coast Guard turning Philippines into the world's laughing stock. All told, in the 11 months of Project Myoushu, the farce has been laid bare. No more than 7% of Filipinos believe in the moro-moro of the US BBM tandem alongside the Tariela Malaya Carpio cabal. Inversely, 93% of Filipinos want answers to the economic woes of the country, from inflation of basic food and utility costs to the lack of jobs, skyrocketing crime and corruption, and the return to combating internal threats and terrorism by US-backed communists and their political fronts. Now, moving on to the future. As January 1, 2024 will usher in the expansion of the BRICS Economic Alliance from 5 to 12. This grouping will soon represent almost 50% of the global population, 37% of global GDP as against G7's 30% in purchase power parity terms, and 42% of the world's energy supply. With China and Russia at the helms, the major goal of expanding trade in local currencies, also known as de-dollarization, will move into high gear. And with it, the US will begin 2024 with imminent economic and financial collapse and political turmoil. As BBM relies on the backing of the US, just as Zelensky did in Ukraine's decade of tension with Russia, BBM will suffer the same fate of Zelensky when the US fails to deliver on its promises of economic and financial benefits to the Philippines. The US military bases and supplies will not fill hungry food tables of the nation. The US-backed fascist initiatives of the Philippine Congress, mainstream media, and BBM's national security establishment will falter even more in 2024. The DDS, the Duterte forces, backlash against US BBM dictatorial attempts is just beginning. So too is the growing dissatisfaction and disillusionment among elements of the retired Philippine Armed Services, as evidenced by the PMA alumni statement against the Congress's detention of two SMNI broadcasters. There is no solution the BBM regime can offer to lower food prices, no remedy to the rising crime wave, and certainly no stopping the crescendo of corruption as glaringly seen in the $500 billion unprogrammed budget for BBM. We see a mounting of the seismic pressures underneath the Philippine social and political economic volcano that the US, BBM, and their cohorts in the corrupt legislature and national security establishment cannot avert from exploding within months after New Year's Day 2024. We pray that the nation stays peaceful and calm through the challenges ahead, even as it must be ready to welcome reform and change to the political order and direction of the nation. beginning 2024, we see a return to Philippine independence, sovereignty, and the path of the Asian century. Major changes in the US will foreshadow changes in the Philippines. The international situation will see greater and greater isolation of the United States and its allies in the West, as its eastern vassals consider greater distance from the declining power. Then the Philippines can rejoin G77 and ASEAN towards the community of shared future for mankind. So that summarizes our assessment of 2023, the year of betrayal, and 2024, the year of moving on towards the greater community of the global South, working with China, Russia, and the G77, the BRICS Plus, and ASEAN towards the community of shared future for mankind. So I was not able to follow as I was reading the various images na na-review na naman natin lahat. Okay. So, okay, if there are any questions, after which we'll go to Ka-Adot, who's still enjoying his breakfast. So, may mga comments from the audience? Do you agree, Hero, that itong nakaraang taon, 2023, ay na-traitor tayo ng ating pamunuan sa Pilipinas? Anong assessment ng iba? Don't make me rush you to comment, but I'm just provoking discussion. Chris, June, Kaado, anybody? How about you? Any comments? Yeah. Let's read some comments. Ano isa ba? Dito? Ayan, from Osman Jin. Well, greeting us good morning. Payapang umaga.
Finas exposed, clown sack puppet, BBM failed the Philippines. That's his, those are his thoughts.
And so, sa baba pa, meron pa ba? Lawrence Halpin, good morning. Bumabati lang po sa atin. PBBM administration either blind, dumb, ignorant, or all is for the sake of personal gain. Perhaps it's all the above. And so on. So yung iba, Alejandro Patagnan, hello, good morning. Emilio Chu, good morning din. Bumabati po sa ating lahat. Okay, while we're waiting for other comments, maybe you can start introducing Kaado,
Okay.
and the topic Kaado will be discussing.
All right. Our next speaker would be Kaado Paglinawan. He is the Vice President of the Asian Century Philippine Strategic Studies Institute for Internal Affairs. And he will be talking about our domestic issues in the country, economy, crime, and internal security.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Karamihan po ng sa aking tatalakayin ngayon ay nahapyawan na ni Kaana Malindugoy at ni Kabentong Laurel. Magbibigay lang po ako ng mga komentaryo sa mga issues. Pero bago po yan, palagay ko po kailangang mag-review tayo ngayong araw na ito. Dahil ng mga nakaraang linggo o baka isang buwan na nakakaraan, diniscuss po natin dito ang mga patakarang pangkaragatan na itinatalaga ng isang treaty ng mga bansa ukol sa paglalayag sa tubig, maging internal o external waters po ito ng ating bansa. Ang title ko po dito, simple lamang, at hindi natin pwede palampasin ito dahil isang napakalaking public figure ang involved dito. At dahil po sa simbolo ng kanyang ranggo sa ating sandatahan lakas, ay maaaring maraming malisya na naman sa katotohanan. So tayo po ay maglilinaw lamang dito ukol sa mga statement na binitawan ng ating AFP Chief of Staff ukol sa mga insidente na naganap to December 10 sa South China Sea. At ang title ko po, simple lamang, maaaring magsinungaling si Browner, pero ang video po, kayo na ang humatol. Okay. Pinagbibintangan po ni Browner ang China sa isang collision incident malapit sa Ayungin Shoal noong Disyembre 10 at tinatawag niya ang mga sinungaling. At binabaliktad ang sitwasyon na ang Pilipinas ang bumangga sa isang Chinese Coast Guard vessel. At sinasabi niya ito ay imposible pero hindi ko maintindihan kung saan niya hinugot ang kanyang rasyonal. Because our ship is too small compared to their larger ship. Hindi ko mawari kung anong koneksyon nun. Dahil ang pagbangga ba ng isang barko sa kabilang barko ay dahil sa laki o sa liit ng barko? Napakaliit naman ng pinaghuhugutan ng pinuno ng ating sandatahang lakas. Napakahina ng puwersa. At ginatungan pa ito ng Manila Times, yung sumulat na reporter, dahil sinasabi ni Browner na siya ay testigo na hinaras ang kanilang bangka. At binangga sila from behind. Okay. Sa pagpapatunay niya na ang version ng China ay isang absurd. Pero binibigyan ko ng leeway si Romy Jr. Dahil Philippine Army po ito. At sa Philippine Army ay hindi naman pinag-aaralan ang International Collision Regulations Treaty. Sa Philippine Navy po kasi yan. And in fact, ang Philippine Navy ay halos ayaw na marin magkomenta rito dahil alam nila yan eh. So pinauubayan na lamang ang patintero sa karagatan sa Philippine Coast Guard. Dahil masigasig naman ang ating kampyon sa Coast Guard na si Tristan J. Tariela, na hininog ng Amerika sa pag-aaral niya sa Japan, at matagal itong inalagaan para sa kanyang pagbabalik dito na maging isang deep penetration asset na nakikipagkumparehan kay Raymond Powell na in-expose na kanina ni Camentong Laurel. Sabi ko nga, talk is cheap. Kaya ang sigurong dapat gawin natin ay panuorin na lang natin muna 2 beses, Joshua. Total maigsi lang naman ito. Panuorin natin ng 2 beses itong video bago natin analysihin. Take it away, Joshua. Mapapansin nyo rito, nasa kaliwa ang ating bangka, nasa kanan ng Coast Guard. Okay. Yung water cannon ng Coast Guard habang gumigilid itong barko ng May ay inilayo na pinatama doon sa yun ang isang anggulo. Mula sa harap. Ito at direksyon ng Chinese Coast Guard pagkilid. Okay. Mamaya ulitin natin yan. Alam po ninyo sa International Regulations for Preventing Collisions at Sea, makikita natin ang posisyon ng 2 barko dito sa video at sa ilustrasyon para malaman natin kung ano yung fact from fiction. Kung ano yung totoo from fake news. Dito po sa chart na ito po ang Chinese Coast Guard sa gitna. Sa kaliwa niya pula, yan po ang tawag port side. Sa kanan niya, starboard. Ano ang port side? Basahin natin. You have priority of movement. Ibig sabihin, yung nasa gitna, may priority of movement over vessels approaching from this arc. Pagilid man, padiretso, o pasalubong. Kaya siya steady lang. Maintain your course and speed with caution. Sa nakita natin, nag-maintain ng course ang Chinese Coast Guard at hindi lamang nag-maintain ng speed kundi pinagalan pa. Kasi kung hindi ho nagpreno ang Chinese Coast Guard, malamang malakas ang naging tama habang gumigilid. Dito po nanggaling yung unay sa May 1. At nakita natin kung anong siya sa gilid. Pero kung siya ay nasa kanan, kung ang unay sa May ang nasa kanan at hindi ang Coast Guard vessel, ang may right of way ay ang unay sa May. Kung dito siya sa berde, kung dito siya sa starboard, kailangan ito ang magbigay kung dito siya dumadaan. Pero dito po pag ganon. Kung mapapansin nyo, ito rin yung pattern doon naman sa unay sa May 2. Nung naunang collision report, pareho-pareho sila ng modus. Unay sa May 1 at unay sa May 2. Kung ihahantulan ninyo sa pagdadrive nyo sa EDSA, ang kanilang taktika ay parang taktika ng mga motorsiklo. O-overtakean ka sa kaliwa o sa kanan tapos bigla kang kakatid. Ganon. Yung pinakasimpleng explanation ko. No? So, pumunta tayo ngayon dito sa rule number 7 ng collision. At pakinggan natin mismo yung lecture. Ayan, nasa kaliwa ho, no? O, yan. Kumabi. Okay, next slide, next video. I-play natin muna yung video dito. Yan, para ho tayo
Rule 7 of the collision avoidance regulations applies to every ship at all times when underway. All vessels shall determine if a risk of collision exists with every vessel they spot, whether by sight, radar, or by other electronic equipment. To determine risk of collision, you should take a series of compass bearings at regular intervals from the approaching object. If the bearing remains the same and the object is getting closer, a risk of collision is deemed to exist. As with any situation at sea, assumptions should never be made based on poor quality information. If collision is deemed to exist, it is good practice to turn early and look all round, ensuring no other vessels in the area are affected by your decision. If you are in doubt, call the captain. Tell us what you would like to learn next by commenting below.
Okay, yung po ang illustration na pinakamalapit doon sa nangyari, no? Na ang orientation po ng resupply boat, inilagay niya ang sarili niya under the risk of collision habang siya ay kumakaliwa. At hindi niya inilagay yung yung kanyang barko parallel, kung hindi diagonal, no? Towards the Coast Guard vessel. So, ano po yung safe maneuver? Yung nakita natin sa video. Option of the resupply boat was to correct its orientation from a diagonal to a parallel distance from the Coast Guard. Kasi pag nagkaroon ng banggaan, hindi na importante kung sino ang nasa lugar, kung sino ang tama, kung sino ang mali. Yun po ang punto ng COLREX. Avoid collision at all costs. Kasi pag nagkaroon na ng banggaan, pareho ng talo. Talo-talo. Wala namang panalo sa kolisyon. At ito ay nire-reinforce pa ng rule number 8. Action to avoid collision. Alteration of course alone may be the most effective action to avoid a close quarter situation, provided that it is made in good time, is substantial and does not result in another close quarter situation. Dahil kung hindi magkakaroon ng close quarter situation, hindi magkakaroon ng banggaan. So, iwas. Ang isa pa pong option na pwedeng ginawa ng Unay sa May 1 would have been to slow down, allow the Chinese Coast Guard to pass and cross over from the port side to the starboard side. Pag lumampas na yung Chinese Coast Guard. Ayan po, very clear. At Philippine Navy, Philippine Coast Guard, Philippine Army, kayo na nanonood dito ngayon, na nagmo-monitor, kayong mga tauhan ni Ed Anyo dyan sa National Security Council at ni Jonathan Malaya, siguro naman kung idodrawing na namin, maiintindihan nyo na ang kabulastugan na pinagsasatsat ninyo at ang mga tsetseburetse ninyo na ikinakalat sa mainstream media ay puro kabalintunan. No? Sa Rule 15 po ng call regs, pag ang dalawang power-driven vessels are crossing so as to involve risk of collision, the vessel on the port side, yung nasa kaliwa, which has the other on her own starboard, shall keep out of way, and if circumstances of the case admit, avoid crossing ahead. Kung masyadong sikip, ay huwag mag-overtake the other vessel. The resupply boat. Nandito pala nakasakay si Browner. Hindi ko naman maintindihan dito kay Robbie Jr. kung bakit sumama pa siya rito. This is supposed to be a civilian resupply. His presence will again militarize the area. Hindi nag-iisip ang ating mga pinuno. Puro junket, puro excursion, puro epal. Tapos sila pa ang galit. After failing to establish the parallel position, as sabi ko kanina, instead, it sought to continue the diagonal direction, causing its astern, yung bandang likuran niya, or rear portion, to cause a minor collision in its attempt to cross ahead of the CCGs. Ngayon, si Browner, paano siya magiging competent witness dito sa incidenting ito? Nakasakay siya. Kaya, naloko na. Nahulog na tuloy ba ito? Nakasakay siya sa supply boat eh. So, ang kanyang perspective, dahil umu-overtake, nasa harapan. At kung sila ang overtake, paano sila bilangga ng Coast Guard vessel? Sa Tagalog po, sa slang, ang tawag diyan, nagurlisan nila. Na-sideswipe nila na naman yung Chinese Coast Guard. And Rule 13 also states, any vessel overtaking any other shall keep out of the way of the vessel being overtaken. Diretso muna. At pag malayo na, pwede na mag-cross. Yung hindi matatamaan. Naku naman, napaka commonsensical naman po ng pinag-uusapan namin. Actually, nagsasawa na ako dahil kung every month o every other week ko ulit-ulitin ko explanation na ito, hindi naman yata tumatanggap ng impormasyon, ng learnings, ang mga utak ng mga katambal natin doon sa kabilang banda. So ano nangyayari dito? Pero bago tayo lumabas dyan, ulitin natin yung video para maliwanag na maliwanag. At kung sino nang bobola. Eto na po. Ulitin natin ang video. Nasa kaliwa tayo, nasa kanan ng China. Starboard, port side, na kanan, na starboard side. Yun. Bumanong pa. Sa harap ito, hindi pwede kita rin. Sa direction, kaya ako na ito nag-overtake. Malayo na eh. Kaya hindi nila pwede sabihin that the water cannon was obstructing their vision. So ayan mga kabansa. Ngayon, Ito yung operational level. Sa policy level, ano nangyayari, mga kabansa? Ang nangyayari, pati si Marcos nagpo-posturing. Although hindi natin ma-verify kung ito talaga ay sinabi niya o provided script lang ito by Raymond Powell. Kasi yun, lumalabas ngayon, mga kabansa. At diretsahan ko na sinasabi sa inyo. Hindi na ho ang presidente ng Pilipinas. Hindi na po ang inyong halal. Kung hindi ang isang dating US Air Force Colonel na ngayon ay nagpapakasasa sa malaki niyang kinikita sa Stanford University sa pamamagitan ng kanyang partnership with the US Naval Research. Ang chief architect ng ating foreign policy. Hindi na po si Bongbong na presidente natin. Si Raymond Powell na po ang nagdidetermino kung ano ang ating foreign policy. At hindi na rin si Enrique Manalo ang ating Secretary of Foreign Affairs, kundi si Tristan J. Tariela po ng Philippine Coast Guard. Ito po ang tambalang Powell Tariela. Powell Tariela na nagpapatakbo ng ating barko kung saan tayo 120 milyones na Pilipino ay nakasakay. Ang piloto po ay Amerikano. At ang navigator po ay made in Japan. Ayan ang problema natin. Teka, baka mahulog na naman ito. Ito po. Halal nyo ba ito, mga kabansa? Binoto nyo ba itong animal na ito? Isang puting, may parang pagkabakla pa siya. Ito po, Office of Naval Research. Nakakatawa po. Dahil ang pangalan ng center niya sa Stanford ay Gordian Knot. Yung sitwasyon natin ngayon, mga kabansa, is a Gordian Knot. Naloko niya tayo na sinasabi niya, aalisin ko yan. Yung buhol na yan, alisin namin through maritime transparency. By exposing the aggressive action of China. Pero ano nangyayari? Tuwihong lalayag ang ating resupply mission, parami ng parami ang buhol. Hindi lamang isang Gordian Knot na, siguro mga 10 na sa pagitan ng ating relasyon sa China. Pabuhol na po tayo ng pabuhol. Katulad ng sinasabi kanina ni Kamento, na parang lahat ng bintana, lahat ng pinto, para tayo magkaroon ng isang mabunying relasyon sa bansang China, ay pinagsasasarahan nila. Ang lahat ng mga joint ventures, lahat ng mga joint projects, lahat na ikabubuti natin sa ekonomiya, sa teknolohiya, sa larangan ng agrikultura, sa turismo, ay para mga bintana at pintuang pinagsasasara ni Raymond Powell at ni J. Tariela. Ang tanong ko, ano ang alternatibo nila? Ano ang ino-offer sa atin ng mga Amerikano? Halintulad ninyo sa kung ano ang mga oportunidad natin na pwede nating makamtan para sa ating sariling development. Ang sabi ni Marcos Jr., which I called wallowing in ludicrity. Ridiculous. The aggression and provocations perpetuated by the Chinese Coast Guard, etc., still our determination. Alam niyo, ibig sabihin ng still ay nagpanday. Sus Mariosep, bigla nabuhay si Fernando Po Jr. Ang panday. Pinanday ang aming determinasyon at protektuhan ang soberanya, sovereign rights, and jurisdiction in the West Philippine Sea. Sinasabi na nga namin dito, yung survey ng Pulse Asia, 7% lang ho yan. Dahil yung 93% natin, nakatutok doon sa ekonomiya, doon sa inflation, doon sa trabaho, doon sa less crime in the streets, less drugs for our young people, and a better life. Hanggang ngayon ho, kawawa naman si anong pangalan ng singer na yun. Wala akong naririnig na Christmas carols. Hindi ba ninyo napapansin, mga kabansa? Ha? Anong pangalan nun? Si Joe Marichan nawawala ng trabaho. Pati si Joe Marichan. Dahil hindi nyo na marinig, wala ng Christmas carol. Kakaunti ang tiyanggi. Nag-report ng Supermarketing Association. Talaga raw inaasahan nila na bagsak. Mas maganda pa daw yung last year kaysa ngayon. Although they're looking optimistic for next year. Of course, wala naman silang choice. Tanong ko nga, ano ba ang gera mo, Marcos? 7%. Ito ang gera ng tambayan ng Pilipino. Controlling inflation, increasing the pay of workers, creating more jobs, reducing poverty by fighting rapid criminality, rapid corruption, addressing the problem of the involuntary hunger, etc. Lahat para sa kabubuti ng pang-araw-araw na buhay ng ordinaryong Pilipino. Hindi pala mangyayari. Dahil ang Pangulo pala ng Pilipinas ngayon, si Raymond Powell, mga kabansa, ang nagdidetermina ng direksyon ng ating bansa ngayon ay naisanla na pala na tayo. Ang problema nito, sabihin ko sa inyo mamaya kung sino tutubos sa pagkasanla natin. Do you have any title, Mr. Marcos? Any ruling, dahil you subscribe to the arbitral ruling, to show how you will show falls under our sovereignty? Anong pinanghahawakan mo? The arbitral award itself classified it as an LTE, a low tide elevation, which by itself cannot be the subject of any sovereign claim. So wala na yung sovereignty. Diba? And China rin, on the basis of the arbitral award and on the basis of UNCLOS, cannot also claim sovereignty. The Philippines also cannot claim sovereignty. Why? Because sovereignty is outside the jurisdiction of UNCLOS and the arbitral award. Wala ho dyan sa diskurso dyan. Maritime entitlements lamang ang UNCLOS at arbitral award. Hindi siya pwedeng pumunta sa lupa na pinagbabasihan ng lahat ng maritime entitlements. How could you be under our jurisdiction? Paragraph 1161 of the arbitral award says sovereign rights are also not applicable in quintessentially militarized areas. Bakit? Paano mag-iisda kung baka magkaputukan dyan? Oh, bubukal ng langis dyan. Kung maya may mga kung ano-anong mga military na kung ano-anong mga coastal estate ang pumapaligid dyan. UNCLOS is based on a potentially peaceful situation where there is absence of conflict. Hindi ho pwedeng mag-operate ang maritime entitlements kung merong mga water cannoning, patintero at baka magkatumbang preso pa dyan. Marcos cannot also lean on the arbitral award. Dahil sa paragraph 1162, ano ang sabi? Yung pinail natin na Philippine Submissions 14A to C tungkol sa Ayungin Shoal is wala silang jurisdiction. So, meron bang kayong mga taga-gobyerno at kamag-anak ng Pangulo, maaari bang bulungan nyo sila kung kayo'y matapang ng kaunti? Para sabihin sa kanya, nakawawa naman siya kay Bubi Tiglao. Dahil ang tawag sa kanya ni Bubi Tiglao, he is a terribly misinformed fool. Eh, totoo naman. Kaya ako'y nagdududa na baka ito ay hindi niya statement. Baka ito ho ay made in Stanford University. No? At binabasa lang niya. Napansin niyo ba ating Pangulo? Hindi na niya kinakausap ang taong bayan, miski sa video, miski sa Zoom. Wala na, puro nakasulat na lamang. Nagkamali pa ng sulat doon sa Marawi, ang sabi, foreign terrorist daw. Oh, yun ang problema pagkawala. No? Alright. Ang tanong, pera o bayong? Mga kabansa. Eh, sino ba ang nag-militarize ng Ayungin Shoal? The Philippines. Nung ibahura ni Estrada, yung BRI Sierra Madre doon. Kaya sabi ng arbitral award, no? Sa 1161, the tribunal finds the essential facts at the Second Thomas Shoal Ayungin concerned the deployment of a detachment of the Philippine Military Armed Forces. Kasama na dyan ngayon si Brownell na nagpunta doon. Militarized na rin ni Brownell yung area. That is engaged in a standoff in a combination of ships from the Chinese Navy, etc., etc. Ayan. This militarized the situation. Kaya nga ang stand ngayon ni Antonio Carpio ay parang nagiging bakla na rin. At ang sabi niya, mukhang hindi uubra dahil militarized yung area. So hindi natin pwedeng gamitin yung argumento, miski na ito is only 115 nautical miles from Palawan, even less than 200, na ito is within our economic zone. Hindi rin ubra, militarized. So ano sabi ni, ano ang lumabas sa talino at galing ng former Senior Associate Justice ng Supreme Court? Nangangalang Carpio. Alam nyo, kasama ko yan eh. Yung nga lang sa Ateneo siya, ako sa San Beda. Pero sabay ho kami sa college. Kaya kilala ko yung mga yan, bata pa kami. Ang sabi ni Carpio, we have to civilianize the area Kanina nagkukwentuhan kami rito ni Raul Gonzales. Ang sabi niya, bigla ang reaction ni Raul Gonzales. Then they have to take out the BRI share matter from them. Yun ang logical hindi ba? Kung isi-civilize mo, kailangan alisin mo ito. Mukhang hindi yun napag-aralan ni Carpio. Kasi pag inalis mo ito, wala nang pagbabasihan ng presensya natin doon. Dahil as we speak, nabasa ko kanina sa dyaryo, may 10 barko na po na nakapalibot ngayon sa Ayungin Shoal ang China. Ay, isa na namang Gordian knot ang nadagdag na kailangan i-untangle. Kung ito ang stand ni Carpio, therefore, Raymond Powell must be educated. Itong chief provocateur na ito, na ginagamit nating Biblia ngayon. Pero mo nakasalalay ang ating kinabukasan on all respects. Because our overemphasis on the South China Sea has turned us away from economic, social, political, and whatever else. Community and public order. Dahil lahat po ng atensyon natin, lumipat na rito. At hindi ako nagsasabi niyan. Ang nagsasabi po niyan is a true expert on these matters na si Romel Banlawi. Na kaya tayo nalusutan doon sa Marawi ng pambubomba ay dahil lahat ng atensyon natin ay dito sa South China Sea where we are chasing a phantom enemy. So, ano nangyayari? Transparency raw. So, ano transparency? Black and white, di ba? I-black and white daw yung gray zone tactics ng China. Pero, ang problema dito, ginagamit nila propaganda. Sa Article 19 ng UNCLOS, pag ginamit mo ang karagatan sa propaganda at sa paggigirian, hindi na ho effective ang innocent passage. Dahil ang freedom of navigation po from point A to point B, lalang diretso ka. Wala kang titigilan, wala kang walang patintero magaganap, walang Christmas convoy, walang mga kung ano-ano kaburetsihan like sasakay ka pa sa isang bangka para magbigay ng budol-budol doon sa makipagbudol-budol doon sa mga sundalo natin sa BRP Sierra Madre. Ina-assume pa natin dahil ito namang National Security Council ang tinutulak, then we must intensify and convince the US, Japan, and its allies to engage in joint patrol. And China naman, pinagtatawalan tayo. Bahala na kayo dyan. Alam naman namin na you are just looking for a false flag na maaaring magpasiklab ng gulo. So mag-self-amusement na lang kayo. Pero ano ang ating presumption? Natutulong ang Japan dito? Tutulong ang Amerika dito? Bakit? Alam niyo, delikado yan lalo. Dahil pag lumabas yan sa 12 nautical miles territorial seas ng Pilipinas, any ship that is not a ship of the coastal estate, which could be Vietnam, Taiwan, or the Philippines, or China in this area, cannot be subject to innocent passage. Kaya ho, pagka may dumadaan ditong barko ng Amerika, meron dyan sumusubaybay. Pag may dumadaan dyan aeroplano ng Amerika, o nung Australia, in one case, sinusubaybayan ho yan ng China. Fair game ho sila dyan. Kaya ewan ko naman kung sino ito nag-a-advise sa ating Coast Guard, sa ating Navy, na kailangan dalhin na ng barkada rito dahil masyadong malaki yung elepante hindi natin kaya. So barkada na ngayon to. Sige mentality na ang pumapasok sa mga strategies natin. Pero, basahin nyo ito. Ito ho, ang pagsuko ni ni Powell. Nare-realize na rin niya na talo na siya. Mga kabasa. Ano sabi niya? Ito, lumaki pala. It's vulnerable not just because of how few people are there and their inability to defend themselves, but the fact that their outpost is deteriorating and will ultimately succumb to time and the weather and the elements. Eventually ho, guguho na dahil kinain na ng ferric oxide. Ang tawag dyan in layman's term, kalawang. That will happen unless the Philippines and its U.S. allies laging may patrino. And yet they're claiming, we are defending our sovereignty. We're fighting for our territory. Who is we? The Philippines and the U.S. Kaya mga Amerikano, tulungan nyo kami rito because we're fighting for our sovereignty. Ano yung sinasakla mong sovereignty? Diyan sa mga kumpare mo. Ingat kayo dyan sa mga kumpare, Mga kumparehan na yan, Barka-barkada na yan. Kaya sa mga pamilya, maraming sumasa kabilang bahay dahil sa mga kumparehan at kumarihan. Ayan, sinasabi ko sa inyo, baka mamaya wala na matira sa atin. To come up with some other solution. Wala na siyang solution. Repair. Replace. Somehow lifting, circumventing, and defeating the ongoing Chinese blockade. Hindi ho mangyayari yan. Dahil Marso pa lamang ng 2014, ang hirap sa atin, hindi tayo natututo. Hindi tayo natututo dahil hindi tayo nakikinig. At nakikinig man tayo, hindi natin iniintindi. China's red line is the Philippines' dead end in Ayungin. Miski na walang isang barko dyan ng China, anong dead end ng Ayungin. And this was communicated to the Philippines at kinote pa ng arbitral award in 11/22. China would never accept the Philippines occupying the Rinay Reef, Ayungin Shoal, under any circumstance or in any form. What could be clearer than that? If the Philippines chooses to ignore China's major concerns and resolute objection insists on construction, this would severely violate China's sovereign rights, push China's bottom line, severely undermine declaration of conduct, the peace and stability in the South China Sea, that China will not sit by idly and tolerate. there will be further damage to relations. All consequences will be borne by the Philippine side. Yan ang red line. It does not leave any quarter that we can still resort to. Even if na-manipulate na tayo ng US for 4 additional bases dito sa ating teritoryo, sa kagustuhan natin, proteksyonan natin soberanya laban sa China, nagdagdag pa tayo ng base militar sa ating kumpare. On what lame excuse and pretext to modernize our military and reinforce our mutual defense treaty? Alam niyo mga kabansa, $82 million lang yan. Kung tayo mag-military cooperation with China, baka China na mag-modernize ng ating military. Kung tayo mag-fisheries cooperation with China, baka yung mga inihaharang nilang maritime na pinagbibintangang militia vessels dyan, ay pahiram sa atin para magkaroon tayo ng deep sea fishing industry. Eh hindi. Nagkaroon na tayo ng pagkakataon doon sa Subic, yung iniwanan ng Hanjin, kukunin ng China. Anong ginawa ng mga military? Sinabutahe, ibinigay sa Australia in partnership with the US. Pumunta ho kayo ngayon doon. Tingnan nyo kung may ginagawang barko. Kinuha lang yun ng US, kinuha lang yun ng Australia para walang mangyari. Pero kung China ho ang nandoon as early as 4 years ago, baka ho part na tayo ng China industrialization sa shipbuilding. Kasi ho gustong-gusto ng China dumami ang mga barko nila. They can easily construct right now 300 ships a year. Even the US cannot do that. So kailangan nila ng factory. Kailangan nila ng shipyard. Ano nangyayari ngayon? Punta doon. Wala hong nangyayari. Bakit ko alam? Eh dati hong welder doon yung bayaw ng anak ko eh. Eh asan yung bayaw ko? Nandun ho sa Binyang, Laguna. Walang trabaho. Dati welder siya doon. Tughadjit pa yun. Wala ho nangyayari doon. Yung Puga Island, gagawin nating tourism hub. Mag-i-invest ang China ng magkano? $2 billion? My God. Eh di lahat ng Chino ho hindi napupunta ng Boracay. Doon na lamang sila. Makakakuha pa sila ng bagnet mula sa Ilocos Norte at saka Empanada. Eh hindi ho Hindi itinuloy. Pupunta kayo sa Puga Island. Anong mangyayari sa inyo doon ngayon? Wala ho. Yung mga seagulls, baka gusto nyo kausapin. Wala eh. How does Marcos reconcile stealing? Parang mali ang spelling nito Baka ito. Ay record ng mga Marcoses, di ba? Hidden wealth, stolen wealth. Pero nagpapatawa lang ako. Stealing, capitulating to the US. We steal pero kinakapitulate sa US. My goodness. Pero kung talagang babasahin mga kabansa, how do we untangle the Gordian knot ni Raymond Powell? Nung pumasok si Raymond Powell, Isa, dalawa lang ang gordian nut eh. Ngayon siguro 3 dosena na nadagdagan. How do we entangle that? Alam ninyo, kung talagang pagbabasihan ng arbitral award, nandoon ang wisdom sa loob ng arbitral award. Kaso, isa lang gusto nila sa arbitral award eh. Yung rendering the 9-dash line as illegal. Wala na silang ibang ginagamit kundi yung pabalik-balik sila ron. O eto, papakita ko sa inyo ang wisdom. Meron palang wisdom dyan. Meron palang solusyon dyan. Ha? Marcos way out. Next slide. Out of a self-imposed yoke. Ayan. Sa 4 na taong natitira kay Marcos o 4 na buwan, depende sa kung ano mangyayari at anong desisyon ng Citizens Coalition for Transformational Change, mga Duterte supporters na kahapon ay nagsimula na ng kanilang National Speak Day, no? At sinuportahan ang pagpapile ng reply ng ating Pangulo sa mga kalukuhang demanda na iniharap sa kanya ni Francis Castro. Umabot to sa mga 500 kahapon. Ano lang yan yung Facebook lang yan. Walang mga anunsyo, walang mga dyaryo, walang... Alam niyo yung naawa ako dun sa mga demonstrators ni Francis Castro. Wala pa ho silang 20. At saka puro bata pa at saka babae. Hindi ko naman sa inaano ang mga babae, pero bakit naman ganon? Kailangan balanse. Iharap niya kanyang 4 remaining years sa 100 years of humiliation ng China. Why? Dahil hindi po nagbaw ang China sa mga kolonyal na sumakop sa kanya, including Japan. They stood firm in history to finally liberating itself from colonial domination, consolidating its territory, and finally arriving to the economic and military powerhouse that Ana Malintukoy was talking about earlier. Ito po ang way out. Una, there must be a good faith understanding that the root of the disputes presented by the Philippines is fundamentally different understandings of their respective rights under the convention in the waters of the South China Sea. Why did I bring this up? Because the Philippines is in denial that there is a conflict of claims. Ang posisyon kasi ng Pilipinas, atin ito. Wala kayong pake. Hindi ho eh. It's basically a fundamental different understanding of our karapatans under the UNCLOS. Kung hindi mo i-respeto yung tinatayuan ko at hindi ko i-respeto yung tinatayuan mo, paano tayo mag-uusap? In such circumstance, the purpose, dispute resolution proceedings is to clarify the positions and obligations under good faith that both governments unequivocally would recognize. Hindi ho makakatulong any other party except the Philippines and China coming together and across the table engaging in a constructive bilateral negotiation, which is not new. Panahon pa ni Marcos. Senior, sinimula na. Binuksan niya ang relasyon. Paano makapag-uusap kung walang relasyon? Ha? Panahon ni Cory, ganun din. Meron tuloy-tuloy bilateral eh. Et cetera. Naging agresibo si GMA. Nagresulta sa Joint Seismic Memorandum of Understanding for Oil and Exploration Research. Ha? Even sa panahon ni Noynoy Aquino, si Voltaire Gaspen nagsasabi that despite the red line sa Ayungin Sol, para hindi magutom yung mga sundalo natin doon, para hindi sila mamatay. Ha? May kasunduan. During Duterte's time, hindi lamang usapan. 5 consultative mechanisms. Napigil lang ng COVID. Eh, ang problema after COVID, ang nag-take over si Teddy Boy Locsin, lahat ng achievements natin from 2016 July to the end of COVID, no, with China, ay ginawa hong panggatong ni Teddy Boy Locsin para magkaroon uli ng environment of conflict na ngayon naman ay binubuhusan pa ng gasolina ni Marcos Jr. Meron na ho. In fact, the joint exploration deal on the 60-40 is standing. At mismo si Bongbong Marcos noong Enero ang nagsabi, simula na ang mga pag-uusap ulit. Pero wala tayong naririnig sa DFA kung sinimula nila. So this leads us to even a greater conflict. At tayong mga taong bayan na ngayon ay humaharap sa mga dagok ng pang-araw-araw na pangangailangan ng ating mga pamilya, ng ating mga sarili. Pinagsama-sama ng ating komunidad at ng ating bansa. Ang tanong, ano ang alternatibo ni Presidente Marcos para sa atin? Merry Christmas na lang ba? Gano'n na lang? Happy New Year? What is so happy about the New Year? Eh, ito nga Merry Christmas, problema pa. Nabalitaan nyo ba? Ultimong yung chief ng LTFRB, pinasok ko sa sarili niyang bahay ng mga armadong grupo. Wow! 2 negosyante nagbabiyahe mula norte sa Victory Liner pa uwi dito. Pinomba ng baril. Nahuli na ba yung mga yon? Ang Skyway ho, paglabas nyo, baka masarang kayo. At may lalabas na may dalang palakol. Para palakulin ang inyong pintana, para kunin ang anumang alahas o pera na meron kayo sa loob ng kotse. At marami pa po mga horror stories ngayon involving peace and order na. Ang nababasa natin sa dyaryo, hindi na ako pakakatagal pa. So ano? Ang New Year's resolution ni Bongbong Marcos. Isinubo niya tayo. Mula nang siya'y makapag chick to chick kay Joe Biden. At pag uwi rito, puro kamalasan ang inaabot natin. Hindi ko na nga tinakil ngayon si Gibuchi Duro eh. Dahil parang nawala na ng malay. Nawala na ng sariling bait kung ano-ano na ho sinasabi sa media. So saan tayo kakapit? Para sa ating inang bayan. Kaya po kahapon, nagpatawag na National Speak Day at gumagawa na ng, kasi nagiging insensitive po ang ating mga national leaders dahil alam nila walang oposisyon. Well, gising na po ang Duterte diehard supporters. Nag-organize na. Gising na po ang PMA retirees. Nag-organize na rin. At marami na po, kung paniniwalaan natin, si General Opinion. Ha? Marami na kumukonsulto sa kanya mula sa active service. Ang report po sa akin, 80% ng Coast Guard hindi sumusuporta kay Jay Tariela. They regard him as malas. And of course, that is only a reflection that even as our president has gone to Japan for the ASEAN, the reception there will not be as warm as the reception where Duterte were to go there and have to meet with them. Where is the alternative? Walang sinasabi, wala tayo naririnig. Puro panggagatong, paggugoyo, pambobola. Para bang intentionally pinaghihirap ang ating bayan, tinatanggalan ng oportunidad para kung mahinang-mahina na ang sambayanan, ay kaya na nilang tanikalaan sa liig. At ikadena sa pader para makuha na nila ang ating tanging yaman. Pero ako'y naniniwala at sa tanging talino ng Pilipino at sa tunay na tapang ng ating mga bayani, saan naninirahan ngayon sa puso ng karamihan, marami po ang nagmamahal sa bansang ito at hindi papayag tayo ay i-flush down the drain na lamang ng mga naghaharing uri. And hopefully this continues and gains some momentum so that by next year we shall have a new leadership. Ayan po kahapon, no? Dito pa, dami. Ayan, listahan ng mga retirees. Marami na ako nag-organisa, nag-uusap-usap sa kanilang mga barangay. Darating ang panahon, just as we experience it on February 25, 1986, let it be that by February 25, it is my prayer, 2024, magkakaroon na tayo ng tinatawag natin na EDSA Masa. People Power Revolution. At magbabago na ang lideres ng bansang ito para sa isang mabunyi, maliwanag, prosperous na kinabukasan para sa ating mga salinlahi. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Kado, for that wonderful and passionate presentation. reminding us of the true problems of our nation and exposing the inept, corrupt, and harmful leadership that the nation currently has. Now, I'd like to give a short reflection and presentation on our Asian Century Philippines position on the before I talk about my article briefly, I would like to give upon the request of Kamentong to give our position on the Israel-Palestine conflict. This week, December 12 or 13, the Philippines reversed its position and voted to condemn or to voted in favor for a ceasefire in the Israel-Palestine war. This was a reversal of the earlier vote a few months ago that we voted to abstain from the for a ceasefire in the Israel-Palestine conflict. We welcome this because the reaction from the Israeli Defense Forces are not proportionate. 7,000 children have already been killed. Innocent people are dying every day. So we welcome this call. Of course, 2 nations in the UN General Assembly voted no in this resolution. The reason that the Philippine delegation to the UN for why they abstained for a ceasefire is because the resolution did not include the call for Hamas, the Palestinian Liberation Group, to release the Israeli hostages. The new resolution this week calls for the release of Israeli hostages, but still that was not good enough for for Israel and US, or the 2 countries who voted not still voted no for a ceasefire. And that is our position here at the Asian Century Philippines. We support Vice President Sara Duterte's earlier appeal last October to call for a ceasefire in the Israel-Palestine conflict, a 2-state solution where we recognize the historical injustices committed against the Palestinians, to understand why the Palestinians sometimes may resort to excess violence when it comes in retaliation for the injustice committed to them for 75 years by the illegal occupying Israeli forces. Now, I'd like to move on to some concerns that I have received regarding my article here, the title, "The Philippines Provoked China's Water Cannoning at Ayungin Shoal." There is a misunderstanding going around that the president has revoked all agreements of the past administration concerning the Ayungin Shoal. That is not true. President Marcos Jr. merely said that if it exists, he rescinds the agreement to revoke the BRP Sierra Madre. But the agreement, as testified by former Defense Secretary Gasmin during the Aquino administration, nandun pa rin, yung agreement not to send construction materials to the BRP Sierra Madre. So pagkain lang, tubig, medicine, etc. What I said in my article, and I received some criticism from a friend, that I am saying that the Philippines had no right to retaliate, to put a structure at Ayungin Shoal when the Chinese occupied Mischief Reef. That is not what I'm saying. My argument is that the response of President Erap was not proportionate. And nakikita po natin ngayon, we are paying the price. Dahil pati si Antonio Carpio ngayon, sinasabi niya, walang jurisdiction ng UNCLOS para i-assess yung resupply mission natin dun dahil military in nature yun. Actually, may magandang proposal si Justice Carpio yung time na yun. In fairness to him, sinabi niya, dapat ipatayo natin na lang ng isang civilian lighthouse or marine research center. Yun dapat yung ginawa yung gobyerno yung 1999 yung ni President Erap. Kasi the Chinese merely built civilian structures in mischief. Tapos tayo, we escalated the situation, as Kaado said, when we militarized Ayungin Shoal. We grounded a military gray ship, kung sa ibang occupied na island sa Spratlys, yung occupy na, for example, in Lawak, puro mga civilian lighthouses lang. Pero dito sa Ayungin Shoal, malaking problema ngayon, isang gorgon natin, yung gray ship. So, and so ayun, this is an interview by Justice Carpio earlier this week. Ayan, that I documented this. He admitted that the 2016 arbitral ruling in UNCLOS does not help the Philippine government. Yun yung base sa tweet or Facebook post ni President Bongbong Marcos. Yung sabi niya, yung resupply mission daw is done in accordance with UNCLOS. Iba yung sinasabi ni Justice Carpio. So, sino yung tama ngayon? Sino yung may mali? Actually, to tell you the truth, I'm not feeling the best situation right now, but this, I feel, is the very important, so I'm going to deliver this information. The President made a statement rin yung sa tweet niya na we remain undeterred in our fight in the West Philippine Sea. But as Kaado has presented, lahat ng atensyon sa totoong problema sa bansa, they are out of touch. The government is not giving attention. I have two friends of mine now, I know personally, the suffering, as Kaado talked about, horror stories, snatching, hold up, yung almost even kidnapping. So lahat ng atensyon ng the government, wala na. They're not focused on the government is not focused on the real problems of the country. And it is my hope as well and prayer that we will have new leadership, because they are driving us into a war for really what amounts to a low tide elevation, a shoal that is underwater during high tide. Why would we risk a war for that when we don't even have the people here are not safe? They are not able to have even 3 meals a day, and they are now talking about a useless war that will benefit no one. And finally, I'd like to give appreciation for Kaana Malindog Uy's earlier statement na we should not listen to the prophets of doom, yung sinasabi nilang economic suicide, kasi may isang so-called expert, isang professor sa UP, gusto daw kailangan na ipag-aaralan na ipatigil yung business trade relations with China. Kung ano-ano sinasabi nila ngayon. So, with that, I'd like to end our forum today. Thank you for everyone. Before that, I'd like to visit some of the questions that the viewers have sent in by Zoom, Facebook, or YouTube, if we have any, or any reflections by our viewers today. This is a video. This is a comment from Zoom. Rebecca Gadi says, "Good video. Bakit parang ang PH boat pa ang lumalapit sa water cannon? Shucks. To show the Chinese boat ang may sala. Did this video appear in the news or they just ignored highs?" Another comment, Mr. Ado, I think we should address this to the public.
Katulad yan ang sinabi ko kanina, ang intention nila is not really to avoid collision, but to fish for a collision. To fish for a collision. Kaya nga yung presentation ko a month ago was entitled Collusion at Sea. Wala sila talagang intention dyan, kundi gumawa ng gulo. Palabasin. Kaso sa cellphone pa lang may mga camera na hindi na pwedeng magtago. Hindi katulad dati, pagka umalis ang barko, doon na lang magkakapicturan ulit, kakakudakan sa kabila. Ngayon, ultimong doon sa biyahe na nagse-selfie na mga tao, nag-TikTok, nagpe-Facebook. So they are able to broadcast even yung mga ganyan. At sabi nga ni Tariela, bakit daw? Ito, I admit, I used a China material here. But why not, Mr. Tariela? Ano ba tinatago mo? As a journalist, lahat dapat ng open source gagamitin ko. Hindi katulad mo, ginagamit mo lang, hindi pa source ng Philippine Coast Guard, nilalagyan mo lang ng label ng pangalan mo, tsaka seal ng Coast Guard. Lahat ng ginagamit mo, Tariela, is from the U.S. Naval Research Institute. Mga materialis ng Amerikano, wala naman tayong ganyan karaming drones. Wala tayo ni isang Poseidon.
Project Bangga.
No? Talagang nagpapabangga sila para magkaroon ng, para makakita ng dugo, para makakita ng mga patay na pinifish out of the ocean at isinasakay sa barko at pagdating doon sa daungan ay inilalagay sa mga kabaong. Yung mga drama ng Pilipino. You want, Mamasapano incident here, yung drama, yung ganon-ganon, yun ang finifish ninyo eh. Pero yung bang 7,000 bata na namatay sa Gaza? Anong posisyon ng Amerikano? Wala. Gusto pa nga nila, dagdagan yun eh. Pagka-genocide dun eh. So, saan patutungo itong ginagawa ninyo? Hindi namin maintindihan at ngayon na failure na yan, na pati si De La Torre umurong na, pati yung sino ba yun? Yung commander daw na babae ng akbayan, umurong na rin. Bakit? Abay nakita nila eh. Sa experience mismo ni Browner. Na-tsempo pa at that time na talagang mabangis ang mga alon. Malalaki.
Video from Ray Powell.
Look at the waves around the boat. Ayan. So, we use open sources and we look for evidence, and out of this evidence, we base our stories. Kayo, inaakusahan nyo kami of being state-sponsored, funded. Wala naman kayo mapakita. And yet, almost every week, pinapakita namin sa inyo at naka-archive na sa mga dyaryo. Na yung Rappler, yung BRI files, yung NUJP, yung kung ano-anong mga, pati pala ABS-CBN. At GMA, may mga, Philippine Depositary Receipts yan. Na napatunayan namin sa inyo, binibigay namin sa inyo mga source, National Endowment Fund, Center for Strategic and International Studies. Foundation this, foundation that. And lately, the American Competes Act, $500 million, kalahating bilyon para i-shame lang ang China. And this is open source. Pinasa ito na appropriation ng US Congress. And it's being distributed. through the U.S. Agency for Global Media Affairs to Radio Free Asia, Voice of America. And some have found its way, $5 million dito sa Christmas convoy. So, asan kayo? Ha? Inakusahan ba namin kayo na kayo ang traidor? Hindi. Dahil napakabigat niyan. Magkakahiwa-hiwalay tayo dyan eh. Hindi kami gumagamit ng mga mahahang na salita. Dahil at the end of the day, ikaw Tariela, ikaw Balaya, kapwa ka rin namin Pilipino. At pag wala na yung amo nyo, sama-sama na ulit tayo para sa national transformation for real change para sa ating minamahal na bayan. Kaya hindi namin kayo ginaganyan. Ano yung isang question, Joshua?
Before that, I'd like to read a quote from Senator Amy Marcos. May wisdom siya na binigay para sa atin. This was made in 2019, pero I think it applies here. This is from Senator Amy Marcos. Quote, "Siyempre controversial ito. Maraming mainis sa akin. Tayo nag-umpisa sa gulo eh. We started it. We picked a fight with China. And then ngayon, yun pala hindi natin kaya. Talagang takaw gulpi tayo." That's from Senator Amy Marcos. I think that wisdom applies here. May agreement na nga not to send construction materials. Wala kayo, and you don't care. Expect more water cannons. That's the case. Yeah.
Oh. Takaw gulpi daw. Oh, bakit po kabentong ano yun? Ay, yung price ko. Ay, hindi. Wala rapol ngayon. Linis na natin yan, oh. Linis na namin yan. Oh. Ayun. Naghahanap ng revenge economy. Kasi nagkaroon ng revenge travel. Oh, kailan daw darating yung revenge economy? Ha? Oh, eto si Michael G. Ha? Nagtatanggal din pala ng comments against China. China sponsored talaga this site. Ganyan lang naman yan.
Go back.
Saan pa to?
He said here, Michael G, sabi niya, I repeat, China had no right to water hose our boats. We have maritime rights in the area, not them. We know we don't like that this is happening, but you have to understand, there is a cause and effect. There is a mutual agreement that has not been revoked, not to send construction materials. So we are not acting in good faith as the arbitral award tells us to do.
We have already been informed about the bottom line of China on the issue. There are existing protocol to be able to avoid provocation and confrontation. Anong sabi ng Department of Foreign Affairs? They're asking us to give advance information. Anong sabi nila? We will not do that. Ang sabi ko nga, alam nyo, sa Tagalog, iba yung, ang iniisip nyo kasi, humihingi sila na magpaalam tayo. Actually, sa cooperation walang paalaman. Ipaalam nyo lamang. You will just inform the other side. E nung panahon ni Duterte, ano nangyayari? Because of the consultative mechanism and the Coast Guard able to connect directly with the other Coast Guard, nagkakaroon po ng cooperation. In fact, nakakatipid pa tayo sa crudo dahil in some of the resupply mission, and I have confirmed this, hindi na ho kailangan maglayag yung Philippine Coast Guard dahil yung Chinese Coast Guard na ang nag-e-escort doon sa resupply boat para makamarating ng maluwalhati sa BRP Sierra Madre. O ngayon, hindi lang yung resupply boat, may Philippine Navy, may Coast Guard, may kung sino-sino pa dyan mga barkadahan ang gusto ninyo. Pag kayo na may nabomba, at sabi ka ni Aimee Marcos, dahil pala yung forma nyo, takaw gulpi kayo, pag inabot kayo, kayo pagalit. So hindi ho natin maintindihan yan. Hindi ho yan magandang ugali ng Pilipino. Tambalang Powell Tariela, Kaado, short, si Lawrence talaga ho. Hindi ko na umabasahin yung bandang huli. Nagpapatawa naman ito, aming kaibigan ito. Okay. So yun po mga kabansa, tayo ay ginagahasa ng Amerika. At ano pa ang ating wisdom? Ang ginagamit nating wisdom, yung wisdom ni Raul Manglapos. Ano sabi ni Raul Manglapos? Pagka ginagahasa yung mga OFW natin abroad. Natatandaan nyo ba? Relax and enjoy it. Napakababa naman ang napakababa naman ang panuntunan nyo sa ating itong bayan. Hindi tayo ganyan. So mga kabansa, tanungin ninyo sa inyong barangay. Ano ang alternatibo nila? Ano ang plano nila? Paano nila re-resolbahin ito? So, wala silang masagot. Bakit tinutuloy pa nila? So, yan ho mga kabansa. For the meantime, we are postponing our growth, our development, our progress, and the future of our future generations. Yun lang naman ho ang gusto namin paratingin dito. Freeze muna tayo. Habang ang Indonesia, ay number 10 manufacturing country na in 10 years that Widodo and Xi Jinping have been cooperating. And in 2025, gusto kong i-announce sa inyo, yung G port sa Melaka, Malaysia. Kaya ho kinakabahan ang Singapore. Mayaman ho ang Singapore, miski napakaliit na nasyon dahil sila ang transshipment point ng buong mundo dyan sa ilalim natin. Ano mangyayari po? Matatapos na yung China, Malaysia, Hongji port sa Melaka na mas malaki pa sa buong Singapore. In other words, hindi na ho kailangan dumaan sa Singapore. Hindi na ho rin nila masasarhan ang Malacca Strait dahil nakaposisyon na rin ng China. So kanino tayo papanig? Sa win-win o sa lose-lose? Yan lang ho issue. Napakasimple. Kung gusto niya ng bayong, dito kayo sa bayong. Pero hindi ho pwedeng pag-shopping yung bayong. Kung pera ang bayong yan. Baka mamaya may labang pambomba yan ng maute. Delikado.
Okay, are there any more further questions? Okay, it's now 12:30. I'd like to end with this final message. This is our wrap-up forum for this year, 2023. And I'd like to just send a message. It's okay to be displeased with what's happening in the South China Sea. But as Attorney Harry Roque reminded us recently, he's not losing blood pressure over what's happening, and neither should we. Look around you. The country is no longer safe. Kidnappings, snatchings, holds up, killings out in the open. And our leadership does not care. Or all they do is party and travel. So if you please understand, your enemy is internal, not external. You want to know who your enemy is, you take a look at your electric bill. You have to understand that our attention to real domestic issues like high price of goods and electricity is being diverted to this, like what Kado has said, a phantom enemy with China in the South China Sea. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone who joined us today here. To all of our speakers, Kamentong, Kado, and Kaana, and all of the viewers from watching us live on Facebook, YouTube, and everyone who joined us in Zoom, and all the people who will watch the replay. Thank you very much. God bless, and have a great rest of your year.